Welcome, Tarnished. After the long journey, we're going to let the Belmont family rest and toss a coin to a Witcher. That's right, we're going over Geralt. My stats for this build for Rune level 200 are 64 Vigor, 20 Mind, 30 Endurance, 80 Strength, 16 Dexterity, and 50 Faith. For the 150 Rune level variant, I'm going to go with 60 Vigor, 14 Mind, 30 Endurance, 60 Strength, 16 Dexterity, and 30 Faith. My suggestion is Warrior for the starting class. This build is going to be broken down in both PvE and PvP. Personally, I enjoy the level 200 brackets for PvP in Arena and Invasions. For me, it's less sweaty and overall more fun time seeing different types of builds at this rune range. In the order of all things, my current favorite build to play at this moment is a Strength Faith build, so I decided why not make something of it. We're going to need a few things in order to make our Witcher. Well, a Witcher. 2 Claymores for the Steel Sword with Quick Step, Ash of War, as well as the Flaming Strikes with Fire Affinity. The Banished Knight's Greatsword for the Silver Sword, Light Crossbow or the Soldier's Crossbow, lots of perfume bottles and bombs, and finally the Clawmark Seal, since we are primarily a strength build. For the armor, I have a few sets here depending on what exactly you want Geralt to look like. I'll leave the 2 up on the screen now, as well as leaving a list of the armor set within the description of the video. But personally, I like a more armored variant. It gives a bit more poise and really comes in handy against some enemies to not get staggered with our slower claymore. Let's go over the arsenal and why I chose these for our Witcher. Wind's howling, so we hunt down the beast that stalked the night, cutting them down one at a time. First off, the Claymore. What hasn't been said about this weapon yet? Good moveset, clean and reliable. While it might not be the best sword in the game, it will always get the job done. Its moveset itself has wide slashes, but what makes it special besides its look is the poke that no other greatsword seems to have yet. That is what makes our Claymore, or the Steel Sword, good against man. With the heavy affinity, we can throw on the quick steps to give us more finesse in combat, as well as mixing up rolls and quick steps to maximize our iframes in combat, getting plenty of backstabs on enemies or players. It's such a basic yet strong Ash of War in the right hands. And why not have some technical aspects of the build other than raw power from incantations and whatnot? Oh, did I mention it also has a solid AR of 682? Yeah. On the other side, we'll be using the Fire Affinity Claymore with Flaming Strikes to mimic Igni along with our other fire incantations. With the Fire Affinity, our AR shoots up to 760, but keep in mind it is also split damage. For our Silver Sword, we're going with the fancy Banished Knight's Greatsword, with the heavy affinity and Stormblade Ash of War to give us the power of Ard. This is great for getting hits off on enemies before they can reach you, or finish off players that try to retreat. A great mix-up from roll catching or light attacks, as most will panic roll into it. The Storm Ash of Wars besides Storm Stomp I think are pretty underrated and don't stand up much to others, but with the cost of Stormblade as so cheap, it is quite spammable if needed, while also carrying a hefty AR of 703. And lastly, the crossbow. I use the light crossbow personally with explosive fire and buried bolts. For the Ash of War, I keep kick because some people just fall for it. And in PvE, it keeps humanoid enemies staggered long enough to retreat or fire a bolt to the face. However, this is more of a supportive backup weapon to harass players or inflict status effect on bosses that we can't really get in melee for an attack. But honestly, the damage isn't why we use this thing anyhow. Moving over to our incantations and tool belt. We have the Clawmark Seal and perfumes as well as bombs. The Clawmark Seal at 25 grants us incantation scaling of 302 with a B in strength and a B in faith. While we won't be using bestial incantations for offensive powers, it does give us the best damage for all of our other incantations. I chose these to fit the theme of the Witcher universe. For Igni we have Catch Flame, O Flame, Surge O Flame, Whirl O Flame, for Quen I picked Barrier of Gold, Protection of the Erdtree, and for Ard I picked Rejection, and for some passive healing I picked up Bestial Vitality. To the alchemical mixtures and potions I picked Uplifting Aromatic to also follow the theme of Quen, and Blood Boil Aromatic. The Physic Flask I have set up allows us to light roll with the Winged Crystal Tear to show the prowess of our inhuman Witcher, along with some HP restore with the Crimson Bubble Tear to cheat death, which honestly is a must for PvP. Oh, and not to forget the usual bombs. The style of this build is not exactly as melee focused as it seems. We can play a skirmisher role to weave in and out of melee safely and adapt to the ever-threatening world of lands between. You might wonder why I chose not to use Flame of the Redmanes. Well, originally I did, but since the last balance change we had in patch 1.08, it was nerfed pretty big, so unfortunately it takes way longer to break most poison enemies and bosses, leaving you open to take some really terrible damage. Yeah. So we switched over to something faster, which allows us to have that extra fire on our blades, like the fantasy oils in most games. Flaming Strike is pretty nice too, considering it has 2 attacks. The fire itself, which staggers most smaller enemies in a cone, and the slash follow-up. Now to go over our talismans in PvE. Crimson Amber Medallion +2. I never swap this out. Giving an extra 8% HP is never not needed. Of course, if you think you might need some extra strength in other areas, I suggest the Green Turtle Talisman, which raises stamina recovery by 8 per second, roughly a 17% increase overall. Next is our biggest one, Shard of Alexander. Honestly, what can be said about this talisman that hasn't? It truly does turn most Ashes of War into potent damage, even if they are on the weaker end of the spectrum. It enhances not only our Flaming Strike to deal more damage, but the punch of our Stormblade. Increases our damage by 15% on our Ash of War attacks, which should never be passed up considering the health pools of endgame bosses, and to dish out more punishment against players. Our third talisman slot will be taken up by Flock's Canvas Talisman. This greatly improves our damage of our incantations, giving our Igni abilities more sizzle with their crispy flames that char our foes. A solid 8% increase, which honestly is quite noticeable, comparing our incantations side by side for our bigger hitting incantations. Lastly, our final talisman I go with is the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. While in PvE it reduces physical damage by 20%, especially with how hard enemies hit, I tend to take this to beef myself up a bit more in the defensive options. 20% is a lot, right? Well, in PvP, it's only 5%. Now, while that can make or break your, well, body, it is still useful. Though I find myself swapping this with the Dagger Talisman if I go for parries. Swear, I've been practicing honest. But enough about silver and monsters. Let's talk about the other threat. Tarnished. I heavily enjoy this build as I mentioned before. Strength Faith is starting to become one, if not the top 3 builds for me in Elden Ring PvP. While keeping in theme with this build and its limitations, to me that's what the challenge is, and the fun. Personally, while I do enjoy my Malekith's Black Blade, I still gravitate towards the cosplayer themed builds. You will be switching weapons quite a bit, from the Claymore to the Banished Knight's Greatsword, depending on the distance and playstyle of your foe. Stylish quick-step backstabs, spell-punishing Stormblade, and mix-up with incantations can throw your opponent off balance, at least in 2v2 arena I figured. The perfumes I chose also give a bit of defense to keep you surviving the fight, giving you a little Quen barrier. If I had one suggestion for the build, don't be afraid to switch on the aggression. Especially with a greatsword and quick step. Be in their face if they're passive. Do not let them get comfortable. Mix up attacks with your Stormblade as well as hard swapping claymores if needed. Pressure with the incantations and roll catch them to oblivion with Catch Flame. Geralt is going to be there with my other builds in the arena series, so keep an eye out for more of him if you're interested. Before I close out and leave y'all trying this out yourself, I wanted to say thank you for the support. The constant support I get from the few of you who are commenting and responding to my videos really does go a long way, seriously. Whenever I see comments, no matter how small, it brightens my week and motivates me to keep going. I mean, I can eventually form a community of my own with all of you here. I hope one day that does happen, and I hope you do all stay even if I don't always do these type of videos. As you know, my channel is not an Elden Ring channel. It's, as I mentioned before, I want to do RPGs of all kinds, and that's just my favorite genre, truthfully. The most creative genre out there, in my opinion. I do hope you all stay, even if I don't always do these types of videos. Until the next Souls-like comes out that From Software creates, I'll be sticking to Elden Ring and the past titles. But all of you stay safe out there, and see you in the next video. Tarnished.